everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Vinyl Tales, where we spin tales about vinyl. Today, I actually have two picked out for you. One is an album by a group that, even though you may not necessarily listen to their music, you've probably at least heard the name of the group. And the other is just the opposite. It's a song that song's been around for a long time. No one knows how long. Does anyone know who wrote the song? Not particularly. But everyone knows the song. It's just one of them ones that gets stuck in your head everywhere. So, stick around. Find out what they are and all kinds of stuff on today's episode of Vinyl Tales. The first thing I want to talk about with you today is an album released July 6, 1987, becoming unexpectedly popular and eventually reaching double platinum. We have In the Dark by the Grateful Dead. Now, before we talk about this album, we got to talk about the previous album back in 1980. So let's get into it. In 1980, the Grateful Dead released an album called Go to Heaven. This album, the album art, or the cover picture on the front, wasn't what they would normally have. It wasn't the same kind of picture that people were used to them having. And so, because of that, they thought that the simplicity of the picture on the front of that album was a sign that the album was a different kind of music. It was more relaxed music. Because by then, the group was actually known for more psychedelic type music. But the vibe that people got off of the picture on the front gave them more of a relaxed, maybe kind of a disco type vibe, even though disco by then was on its way out. And then when people actually played the music and played the songs, the songs got average to negative reviews, and the sound was compared to that of the Doobie Brothers at the time, if you know who the Doobie Brothers are. They're more of a country band. And so for the Grateful Dead, who is known for a psychedelic type music, to be compared to a country band like the Doobie Brothers just wasn't a good look for them. And so it took them a while to release the next album. It's because this one didn't come out until 7 years later in 1987. However, there's a big difference between these two. Go to Heaven, released in 1980, most of the songs on that album were less than a year old, so they hadn't been played very much. They hadn't really had a chance to polish them up all that well. But most of the songs on this album have been getting played since 1982-83 time. And so, having had upwards of 5 years to play the songs before they finally released them on an album, they had more time to get polished up and more time for the band to perfect the songs before they finally released them. And so when the album finally came out, the maturity of this album versus the other one was much more appreciated, and people liked it better. But did you know this album, like the one from the previous episode, wasn't actually recorded in a sound studio just like all the rest of the artists and bands out there? This one was recorded in a theater. The very same kind of theater that you use for plays and musicals and maybe talent shows. That same kind of theater is where this album was recorded at. What they did was they found a theater out in California, and they went in and they turned all the lights down. So the band was playing in the dark, and there was no audience. It was just the band in there up on stage. And so what they did for lighting was they took the lighting that they would use on tours for their live performances, and they set that up in the auditorium in this theater. And so they recorded with the same kind of lighting that they would have on a tour, because they were trying to have the band feel like they're performing in front of a live audience while out on tours going across the world. That was the feel that they wanted to go for. So they turned down all the lights, and they didn't let anyone in. So it was just a band playing for themselves, but they used the same kind of lighting setup to give that kind of feel. How they recorded it was they took all the electric instruments and they ran the electric instruments down to the basement, but they ran them down to amplifiers that were in isolation rooms down in the basement, instead of having these amplifiers up on stage. They ran the electric instruments down to the basement into these isolation rooms with where the amplifiers were staged at, while the drums themselves just remained bright and loud up on stage. From there, everything was directed outside, where they had a recording truck parked out front. And that's where all the sound went and where all the recording equipment was at. The band, how they would record was they would play for a little bit, and then they would take a break, go off, and they would actually sit and talk about the music that they had just played. And then they would go back and they would play some more, and then they would take a break and talk about the music some more. And they said that pattern of playing and then talking about what they just played and back and forth not only benefited the music, the songs, but it also benefited the band themselves because it gave them more of a feeling of camaraderie. They said that it was all something that they should have been doing before because of that. I guess when they normally record in recording studios, it would start out as a recording session, but they would get lax and they would get lazy and just start talking, and it would eventually turn into nothing more than a simple hangout session. And the idea, the experience of recording in this auditorium, in this theater, playing just for themselves, no audience, no crew, just the band and their instruments, playing for themselves in this dark theater, was actually quite a fun experience. Now, I don't know about you, but to me that actually does sound pretty fun. Playing just for yourself with you and your friends, playing your music, no one there to cheer for you or to boo you off stage in this acoustically sound environment. That does sound pretty fun. But we're not done talking about this album. I got a couple songs picked out for you that I also want to talk about before we get into that other thing. So stick around with me, and here we go. Okay, so the first song off of this album that I have picked out for you is the song Touch of Grey. Now, Touch of Grey may not have been released until this album in 1987, but It was actually first played as a encore song in September of '82. So by the time the album came out, the song was already 5 years old. The lyrics for most of their songs are written by a guy named Robert Hunter, whereas Jerry Garcia would pair with him and write the music. But for this song, Touch of Grey, Robert Hunter only wrote most of the lyrics. One line was written by Jerry Garcia instead. That line is, "Light a candle, curse the glare." This line is actually a play on words taken from, it's a reference to Eleanor Roosevelt's death, originally written by a man named Adlai Stevenson back in '62. What Adlai Stevenson originally wrote was, "She would rather light a candle than curse the darkness." And it is that line that Jerry Garcia took, kind of rewrote, and put in the song. The song itself is actually about overcoming life's obstacles and how no matter how much you may want things to work out, you may want things to go in your favor, there will always be bad things or a touch of gray that's going to happen in life. The line "touch of gray" was originally written as simply as a pick-me-up. The band was going through hard times, they weren't doing very good, and so the line was written as simply as a pick-me-up, but it did more than just pick the band up, make them feel better, make them get back into it. The song itself kind of became their anthem, and they played it multiple times at multiple shows for many years to come. They played it quite often. So it was more than just a simple pickup. It became an anthem to all kinds of people. But that's just the first song I have picked out. The second song, a little bit different. So let's get into that other one, and then we will get to that other song that I have picked out. That's not actually off of this album. Here we go. The second song I have picked off of this album is called "Throwing Stones." "Throwing Stones" is actually about the human condition. It talks about how there are many problems in society and in nature that actually could be fixed, but people nowadays are too self-absorbed. They're too concerned with themselves and what can make themselves better, what they want, how do they get what they want, instead of trying to work together, trying to overcome differences, so that way we can make the world a better place, instead of simply destroying it and harvesting resources. It actually talks, if you listen to the lyrics, it talks about people from all levels of influence. It talks about the average person walking down the street. It talks about the rich that play the system. It talks about the politicians who tend to throw around their power and influence to stay on top. But it also talks about how anyone, regardless of who you are, is actually capable of making a difference in the world. You don't have to be rich and powerful. You can just be anyone. But that's all that I got off of this album for you today. Let's get into that other song that I was been leading on about this whole video. I guarantee you that you'll recognize it. So, now for the real exciting part of this video. Here we go. Okay, so this other song that I have picked out for you, it's just an individual song, not a whole album this time. This song by Sheb Wooley. This song is "The Purple People Eater." Yes, "The Purple People Eater." Released in May of 1958 by Shep Woolley, MGM, whose name is on the label, originally rejected this song. They said that it wasn't the kind of stuff that MGM wanted to be associated with. However, when an acetate, or essentially an early test pressing, eventually made its way to the New York office, the front desk there made a note. What they noticed was during lunch break, upwards of 50 of MGM's employees would actually listen to this song while they were on lunch. And so the front office there, the front desk, made a note of this. They noticed that a lot of people were listening to this song. And the higher ups at MGM decided, hey, since so many of our own employees, our own people seem to enjoy listening to this song, they seem to like this song, why don't we just go ahead and release it? And so, come May of 1958, MGM finally released the Purple People Eater on their own label. The song itself is about a strange creature that comes to Earth because he simply wants to be in a rock and roll band. But the idea itself came from a joke. I guess a friend of Woolley's, the friend's child, Woolley's friend's kid, told a joke to Woolley. And after Sheb Woolley heard this joke told by this little kid, he got the idea for the song. And less than an hour later, the song was written. This song's a fun little novelty song. It's real catchy, but much of the humor for the song actually comes from toying with the listener's expectations. For instance, the song in the beginning talks about the creature having a horn. Well, you would think that it's something like a rhino or a unicorn or a triceratops if you're talking dinosaurs. But later on in the song, the creature starts playing it like a musical instrument. So this horn becomes a woodwind instrument. And another example is the way the song sounds. It makes you think that this creature is purple and he eats people, as he's a purple people eater. And so you ask anyone to draw a picture of what the creature in this song may look like, and just about every single time they'll make the creature purple. But if you actually listen to the lyrics, the creature himself says that he eats purple people. So he's not purple himself, he eats purple people. So instead of the creature being purple, when you draw the creature, you should instead make the guy that he's eating purple skin. And it's other little silly things like that that makes the song all kinds of fun. The song itself has been covered and recovered multiple times by multiple people, but in 1967, Sheb Woolley himself, who originally wrote the song, in 1967, Sheb Woolley released a different version of this same song called The Purple People Eater 2. Now, Sheb Woolley actually released albums, multiple albums, with underneath a different name. He didn't use his real name. That's why the name he used to release Purple People Eater is not normally associated with the name of the song itself. The name he released this new version under was actually Ben Colder. Now that name may not sound familiar to some of you, but some of you older people may actually recognize that name because he was known for his more comedic, more humorous kind of recordings and albums that he released. But Ben Calder was actually Sheb Wooley, who originally wrote and released The Purple People Eater. And so in '67, he recorded an alternate version of that song called The Purple People Eater No. 2 on an album using the name Ben Calder. But that's not the end of this song. This song's been covered, it's been reissued, it's been talked about or played in multiple movies and TV shows throughout the years. But did you know this song actually has its own movie? In 1988, Disney Channel, yes, Disney Channel, made a movie based on this song. The movie is called Purple People Eater, and you can actually look it up and watch it. In the movie, this little boy, played by a young Neil Patrick Harris, this little boy plays the song. By playing the song, he actually summons the creature. The creature comes and picks him up and takes him off on an adventure. Well, during the adventure, the creature and the boy, played by Neil Patrick Harris, actually get to become good friends. And so by the end of the movie, they're actually friends instead of being scared of each other like you would expect. But yes, this song has its own movie. But that's all I got for you today. Who would have known? One album recorded in the same place that you'd go to watch your local play, and another song that's been well known and popular for decades was inspired by a joke told by a little kid. If you've got any other kind of cool stories or facts about songs and albums, feel free to let me know, and I will certainly look into them. You never know. Something you suggest may end up in the next video. But for now, my name is Brandon, and this has been Vinyl Tales, where we spin tales about vinyl. I hope you enjoyed listening to these stories, as I enjoy looking them up. But that's all for today. I hope you had a good time, and have a good day. See you later.